Hi students, welcome to lesson number 47, Karl Marx, part B. Karl Marx was one of the most influential social thinkers of the 19th century. He is known to the world as the Architect of Socialism and the Champion of Communism. He was a German scholar, a historian, an economist, a political scientist, a great humanitarian, and a philosopher. He committed himself to the cause of the exploited working class and declared a kind of an intellectual battle against the exploiting rich or the capitalist class. The main objectives of this lesson are: number one, to discuss about the Marxian concepts of classless society; number two, to discuss about the Marxian concepts of alienation. Karl Marx, the theory of class struggle. Marxian theory of class struggle is based on the following premises. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. It is not the consciousness of men that determines their being, but on the contrary, their social being that determines their consciousness. The ideas of the ruling class are in every age the ruling ideas. That means the class which is the dominant material force in society is at the same time its dominant intellectual force. Marx saw the emergence of a new socio-economic system known as capitalism, built upon the ruins of feudalism. He believed that human society passed through different stages of development and that each stage contained the seeds of its own destruction. However, Marx did not see history as a monotonous succession of struggles between the rich and the poor. Although the class war has always been between the oppressor and the oppressed, the leading contenders in the social drama of conflict differed markedly in different historical periods. The fact that modern workers are formally free to sell their labor while being existentially constrained to do so makes their condition historically specific and functionally distinct from that of earlier exploited classes. Now let us discuss about the Marx analysis of social conflict in the capitalist society. Number one, the importance of property. To Marx, the most distinguishing characteristic of any society is its form of property, and the crucial determinant of an individual's behavior is his relation to property. Classes are determined on the basis of the individual's relation to the means of production. It is not a man's occupation, but his position relative to the instruments of production that determines his class. Property divisions are the crucial breaking lines in the class structure. Then next one is economic determinism. The capitalist society is based on the concentration of the means of production and distribution in the hands of few. The capitalists who hold the monopoly of effective private property take control of the political machinery and their interests converge in the political and ideological spheres. The bourgeoisie use the state as an instrument of economic exploitation and consolidation of self-interests. The economic power of the bourgeoisie is transformed into political power, and the entire political processes and institutions, including the courts, the police, and the military, and the ruling elites, become subservient to the interest of the capitalists. The next one is the polarization of classes. Inherent in capitalist society is a tendency toward the radical polarization of classes. The whole society breaks up more and more into two great hostile camps, two great directly antagonistic classes. They are bourgeoisie and proletariat. Indeed, Marx repeatedly referred to the small capitalists, the petty bourgeoisie. But on maturation of class consciousness and at the height of the conflict, the petty bourgeoisie and small capitalists will be deprived of their property and drawn into the ranks of the proletariat. Another aspect is the theory of surplus value. Capitalists accumulate profit through the exploitation of labor. The value of any commodity is determined by the amount of labor it takes to produce it. The labor time necessary for the worker to produce a value equal to the one he receives in the form of wages is less than the actual duration of his work. He works half of his time for himself and other half for the entrepreneur. The term surplus value referred to the quantity of value produced by the worker beyond the necessary labor time, meaning by the latter, the working time required to produce a value equal to the one he has received in the form of wages. Since employers have the monopoly of the instruments of production, they can force workers to do extra hours of work, and profits tend to accumulate with increasing exploitation of labor. Then another point is pauperization. The wealth of the bourgeoisie is swelled by large profits with corresponding increase in the mass of poverty, of pressure, of slavery, of perversion, of exploitation, of the proletariat. To Marx, poverty is the result of exploitation, not of scarcity of resources. Then another aspect is alienation. The economic exploitation and inhuman working conditions lead to the increasing alienation of man. Work is no longer an expression of man himself, only a degraded instrument of livelihood. It is external to the worker and imposed upon him. There is no fulfillment in work. The product of work becomes an instrument of alien purpose. Man becomes more and more enslaved as he sinks to the level of a commodity. And indeed, the worker becomes the most wretched of commodities. He becomes estranged from himself, from the process as well as product of his labor, from his fellow men and from the human community itself. Economic alienation results in the devaluation of the world of men, self-estrangement, and powerlessness. Then another point is class solidarity and antagonism. With the growth of class consciousness, the crystallization of social relations into two groups becomes streamlined and the classes tend to become internally homogeneous and the class struggle more intensified. The next aspect is proletarian revolution. At the height of the class war, a violent revolution breaks out which destroys the structure of capitalist society. This revolution is most likely to occur at the peak of an economic crisis, which is a part of the recurring booms and repressions characteristic of capitalism. The next aspect is the dictatorship of the proletariat. The violent revolution terminates capitalist society and leads to the social dictatorship of the proletariat. The revolution is violent but does not necessarily involve mass killings of the bourgeoisie. Since property is wrested from them, the bourgeoisie will cease to have power and will be transformed into the ranks of the proletariat. The inevitable historical process destroys the bourgeoisie and the proletariat establishes a social dictatorship. It is a transitional phase to consolidate the gains of the revolution. The political expression of the social dictatorship was conceived by Marx as a form of workers' democracy. The next aspect is inauguration of the communist society. Social ownership of private property will eliminate class and thereby the causes of social conflict. The state will eventually wither away as it becomes obsolete in a classless society in which nobody owns anything but everybody owns everything, and each individual contributes according to his ability and receives according to his need. Marxian concept of classless society. Marx never aspired for revolution just for the sake of a revolution. He wanted to establish an egalitarian society known for equality and social coherence. He intended to see a classless society which is free from all types of exploitation. He believed that the class struggle would help the establishment of such a society known as classless society. Means a society without the antagonistic classes. It means a society in which the classes with opposing interests such as the landowners and the landless workers and management, freemen and slaves, the rich and the poor, exploiters and the exploited, capitalists and laborers, etc. are not found. As Marx stated, when the human society in its historical development reaches the capitalist stage of production, it gets divided into only two classes as the bourgeoisie and the working class or the proletariats. The former one is the exploiting class, while the latter is the exploited one. Their interests always clash and conflict arises. It is this class conflict which is always responsible for social movements and revolutions. When the class conflict reaches its final stage, the workers gain upper hand in it. They become victorious in this struggle and establish their regime. In the initial stages, the dictatorship of the proletariat will be established, and thereafter it prepares the way for the transformation of the society. This transformation finally culminates in the establishment of the classless society. Marx was of the opinion that the capitalist system would not last long because it is sowing the seeds of its own destruction. The prophecy of capitalism is the prophecy of doom or despair. The capitalist system enlarges the number of workers, brings them together into compact groups, makes them class conscious, supplies them with means of intercommunication on a worldwide scale, reduces their purchasing power, and by increasingly exploiting them, arouses them to organized resistance. Marx wanted such system to go at the earliest. Hence, he gave a call for the workers to put an end to it. Hence, his clarion call, "Workers of the whole world, unite. You have nothing to lose except your chains. You have a world to win." Marx was very sure of the fall of the capitalist system. Hence, he wrote in the Communist Manifesto, "The bourgeoisie produces its own grave diggers. The fall of the bourgeoisie and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable." The class society, then in the Marxist thought, refers to the ultimate condition of social organization expected to occur when true communism is achieved. The classless society is the final phase of communism, where there will be no classes and no class conflicts. The working principle of the communist society would be, from each according to his abilities and to each according to his needs, all for each and each for all. Now let us discuss the political and economic principles of the classless society. Marx was much pessimistic about the state and had contempt for its role. He considered it nothing but the organized means of violence. According to Marx, the state represents the dominant class in the society. The state, which is based on exploitation, aims to protect the interests of the rich and of the ruling class. The state in its historical development has always stood with the capitalist class, protecting its interests. Hence, Marx stated that socialism should aim at not only removing the classes but also the state. After the class struggle has resulted in the victory of the proletariat and the establishment of a socialist society, however, there will be no further need for such a repressive institution. Theoretically, the state then is expected to wither away. All that the workers should unite and hasten the process of the revolution, which will ultimately make the state disappear. It is believed that After the proletarian revolution, the dictatorship of the proletariat will bring about social and economic justice. There will be no thesis, antithesis, and class war. One man will not exploit another man, and one class will not exploit another class. Thus, the ground will be prepared for the disappearance of the state. The complete disappearance of the state marks the zenith of Marxian communism. Though the ultimate aim of the revolution is to establish a classless society, the proletariats are going to establish their dictatorship for some time. This dictatorship, which will prevail for a short period, will act to transform and communication. In the temporary phase, labor will be paid according to work, but the ultimate aim is to realize the principle from each according to his ability and to each according to his need. The dictatorship of the proletariat will protect the needs of the working class and provide it socio-economic justice. Under the loving care of the dictatorship of the proletariat, society will blossom into communism. As it is stated in the final phase of communism, classless social system will appear. In such a social system, there will be one single form of public ownership of the means of production and full equality of all members of society. Under it, the all-round development of people will be accompanied by the growth of the productive forces through continuous progress in science and technology. In a communist society, the ability of each person will be employed to the greatest benefit of all the people. The classless society is one in which all the major industries, commercial establishments, communication systems will be collectively owned and their profits collectively shared. An increase in production or wealth or property will never result in an increase in inequality, but will add to the prosperity of all. Medical, educational, commercial, banking, transport, communication and other facilities are made equally available for all. Their main motto will be service and not profit making. All landed property will be in the ownership of the society and cultivation will be carried out on cooperative basis. In the whole economic field, there will be no scope for exploitation of any kind. Classless society ensures uninterrupted progress of society and provides for all the members material and cultural benefits according to their growing needs. People's requirements will be satisfied from public sources. Articles of personal use will be in the full ownership of each member of the society and will be at his disposal. Every able-bodied person will participate in the social labor and thereby ensure the steady growth of the material and spiritual wealth of the society. The communist classless society represents the highest form of organization of public life. Classless society is virtually the stateless society. It does not mean that there will be nothing but chaos in such a society. It will by no means be a society of anarchy, idleness and inactivity. On the contrary, people's organizations will evolve on a voluntary basis to look into the needs of the masses. These organizations will have only a social base and not a political one. The rights, freedom, honor and dignity of the citizens will be closely protected by the society with the help of these organizations. Classless society is a homogeneous society. According to Marx, the elimination of the distinction between classes makes for greater homogeneity of society. All people will have equal status in society and will stand in the same relation to the means of production. It will actively participate in the management of public affairs, for there is no scope for the re-emergence of the class system. Now let us discuss about the Marx concept of alienation. Alienation refers to the sense of powerlessness, isolation and meaninglessness experienced by human beings when they are confronted with social institutions and conditions that they cannot control and consider oppressive. Broadly speaking, alienation denoted a socio-psychological condition of the individual which involves his estrangement from certain aspects of his social existence. For Marx, the social arrangements which form the context of work in capitalist society alienated the worker. They failed to provide him with the opportunities for a meaningful and creative existence. The worker is alienated in that neither he receives satisfaction from his work nor receives the full product of his labor. The worker is accordingly alienated from the true nature of man. The conditions that characterize the modern industrial production prevent the worker from exercising his full creative powers and so releasing the full potentialities of his nature. Alienation is that condition when man does not experience himself as the active bearer of his own powers and richness, but as an impoverished thing dependent on powers outside of himself. According to Marx, alienation results from the lack of sense of control over the social world. Marx applied the term alienation to many social institutions such as law, government, religion and economic life. But he gives more importance to alienation in the economic field. According to Marx, alienated labor involves four aspects. Number one, workers' alienation from the object that he produces. Number two, from the process of production. Number three, from himself. Number four, from the community of his fellow men. Marx was of the opinion that alienation would lead to dehumanization and devaluation of human beings. The worker is a victim of exploitation in the world of capitalism. The more wealth the worker produces, the poorer he becomes. Just as labor produces the world of things it also creates the devaluation of the world of men. This devaluation increase in direct proportion to the increase in the production of commodities. An important source of this alienation in Marx's view is the extreme division of labor in modern societies. Marx felt that worker becomes a minute part of a process, a mere cog in a machine. Work becomes an enforced activity, not a creative and satisfying one. This situation is aggravated in the capitalist economies, in which the profit produced by the labor of the worker goes to someone else. In short, the worker spends his life and produces everything not for himself but for the powers that manipulate him. While labor may produce beauty, luxury, wealth and intelligence, for the worker it produces only the opposite, that is deformity, misery and poverty. Marx has made a great contribution to the realm of sociology of knowledge. Marxian ideology is very much helpful to understand the society from conflict perspective. Marx has stressed that we should have an integral view of the society and not a partial one. This integral approach of Marx is of great sociological significance to understand the society in a scientific way. The ultimate objective of the Marx was to establish a classless society based on social harmony and justice.